everyone, and welcome to another Scots Way podcast. And today we're going to talk about CrimeCon, a true crime event which will be in Glasgow on the 16th of September. And to learn all about it, I'm joined now by Nancy Baughen. Hello, Nancy.
Hello, lovely to meet you, and thanks for having me on today, Alistair.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. So what can you tell us about CrimeCon? Give us the kind of sales pitch of it.
I can tell you what it isn't. We don't all cuddle our favourite serial killers and talk about what crimes we love. So that's my important starting point. It's not Comic Con. It is definitely not that. So the event actually launched in the UK during the pandemic in London in September 21. And we came up to Glasgow for the first time last September. Loved the city so much that we're coming back on the 16th of September. It basically is an environment for people that are interested in true crime, not the macabre, not the sensationalist, but people that are genuinely interested in the subject matter through the whys, the how-tos, the what-ifs, all of this sort of mystery and intrigue. People come to CrimeCon to learn from leading experts in all different fields. So we welcome guest speakers from all different disciplines, whether they're ex-officers or working in the forces or psychologists or even criminals. You know, we've had rehabilitated criminals at CrimeCon. We have a whole host of people to share their stories. But we are extremely, back to my first point of what we're not, we're extremely victim focused. So everything we do remembers that this is actually all because of someone's, worst moment, their darkest moment in their lives. And it's being respectful to the victims and the families that were involved.
Yeah, because I was looking at your website and you do have links to helpline numbers and a page called Loved Ones Lost. And you say that's at the centre of everything you do, isn't it? That kind of, because you are dealing with real situations and real people.
Yeah, I mean, it's very different to, I'm an event organiser, and it's very different to anything else that I've ever curated because, say if you're doing a fashion event or a hair event or a construction event, you're dealing with brands and companies and personalities involved, but it's very much business at the forefront. It's for a particular reason. With this, you're dealing with people that aren't necessarily professional speakers. If you think of the families that come and share their stories, they're not personalities. They've never been media trained. They don't know anything like that. They've just had something horrendous happen to them, but they're using CrimeCon as a platform to either keep their case in the public eye because so many cases are unsolved in this country, or they're doing it for cathartic reasons because they want to talk about their daughter or their son or their brother or their mother, or they're doing it to change law and legislation. So we're having an awful lot of impact with that. And I think when I took CrimeCon on, I probably underestimated that realness of CrimeCon. Certainly underestimated the impact that would have on me and my team as well. So it's been very eye-opening, but I think we've been very welcomed by the true crime community, and there's a lot of people that come to CrimeCon because they want to help. They want to help these families and keep these stories in the public eye.
So did you get involved as an event organizer originally and then become kind of more personally involved with it?
Yeah, so basically the sort of the history of it is CrimeCon's been running in the US since 2017. It's owned and it's operated by a company called Red Seat Ventures. So true crime was experiencing such a rise in the US. In the US, the business model is they move from state to state. So Orlando's coming up in a couple of weeks. They did Vegas last year. Next year, they're in Nashville. So they take the show to different states in America. What they'd seen is since its inception in 2016 was that people were coming over from Europe and the UK.
Right.
And from the very, very first moment they did it, people had an appetite from this side of the pond, if you like. And they wanted to come to CrimeCon. So the owners of CrimeCon in the US looked to find an event organizer to effectively run it here. We got introduced, I'm 30 years in the events industry. So through a wonderful dear friend, Jane Galpin, she introduced us to the owners, we chatted, we hit it off, and he trusted CrimeCon with us. And then we formed, rather than us just running it for him, we formed a joint venture. So it's ours operating here and his in the UK 50-50. And then we've gone for it. With anything I ever do, I get into the industry anyway, whether it's fashion or beauty or construction or design. You know, we've worked in a lot of different areas. What I hadn't realised, I don't think, is how much CrimeCon would change me as a person. So I only now watch, read. I had the pleasure of meeting you a few weeks ago, and you know, I don't do any fiction now. I only watch, read, and listen to true crime. It's completely changed me. I'm still a geek. I'm still a Marvel fan. I still work on Comic Con. That's still, you know, my passions, if you like. But in terms of my go-to, most nights I'm reading, listening, or watching true crime. I can't even do the fiction. I'm too critical now, Alistair. I'm like, no, that's not the police procedure. That's not what will happen. That's my friends in the that's all nonsense. So I can't do it now. It's very weird, but it's really changed me. I mean, to the point now that I have been appointed by the Metropolitan Police to be a community worker with them. So I'm the voice and the conduit between the London police force and the new recruits and victims families. There's a lot of look, there's not a lot of trust there at the moment after the Casey review. They're in a bit of a mess. So they're trying to engage different community groups, and there's a lot of love lost, if you like, from people who've been affected by true crime by cases in London. So I've been doing a bit of work there, and that's a real honour. I mean, if you'd have told me 4 years ago that I'd be, you know, working with New Scotland Yard and working with victims' families and really making a difference, I would have said, who is that Nancy? But this is where we are. So it's quite, that's what I mean by it's changed me as a person. It's a very, very interesting event, and long may it continue. And sadly, when I say long may it continue, it will continue, because crime won't go away. This is the problem. Crimes change. We'll see more fraud some years. We'll see more knife crime some years. We'll see, you know, domestic abuse rose during the pandemic. We will see the ebbs and flows of what's going on in society mirrored through what we're discussing at CrimeCon, sadly. But there are also a lot of good stories that come out of it. And dare I say, everyone that comes has a really good time and a lot of laughs.
Yeah, I know. And it's interesting to make that point. You know, you were saying that you're now involved with the Metropolitan Police, so you have a kind of a legitimacy through the eyes of the police. You've also got experts, as well as, you know, people who are, I don't want to use the word amateurs, but you have got, you know, there's been the rise in true crime podcasters and true crime writers. The interest in it as a genre, for want of a better term, does seem to have grown recently.
It's grown massively. I mean, you only have to look at mainstream TV now, where you've got ITV and BBC commissioning true crime programs. You know, it wasn't that long ago that it was a bit of a taboo. You know, if you said, I like true crime, you know, it was in the corner of bookshops. It was in the, you know, I'm showing my age now, but videos, it was in the corner of the video shop. I am showing my age now. You know, it was that, it was pretty much that sort of, oh, you like true crime. But now people are very interested in it. And I think it's because, if you think of when true crime was originally produced, it was very sort of who done it. Then it was how did they do it? And it went very bloody and gory and quite graphic. And now it's very much, why do they do it? Why has this happened? Through, if it's a murder case, how did that killer get away with it? What was the motivation? Right through to the, how did the criminal justice system then give justice to that family? You know, the whys and the wherefore. People are very interested in what's going on. I mean, we've had the Lucy Letby case recently, you know, and she refused to stand and look at that family. That's completely wrong, in my opinion. And there's a lot of people saying this is wrong, and a lot of people are saying this has to change, and that is a good thing, because you know, if that ever happened to anyone else, and it could do, it's important that we sort of stand together in this. So it's been quite an interesting turn of events, this one.
And you mean, we've spoken about the different speakers that come along, from writers and academics and podcasters and scientists even, But who are the audience? Who comes along to be part of the audience and be there?
Interestingly, in the main, me. It's middle-aged women. Middle-aged women seem to like true crime. There's a lot of psychology behind why that is. A bit more cynical, maybe getting more teenage daughters a bit more aware, but women in the main. It's basically people who are, well, the consumers in the main, people that are interested in true crime. Now, I do get a lot of criminology students, a lot of people that want to be police officers, a lot of people that are interested in law and legislation. So there's a lot of those types of career disciplines coming through. But in the main, it is consumers that want to learn about true crime.
That's interesting. Sorry, I was going to say it's interesting that it's like many conferences in any area, there are people that can come along and make connections in areas that they're interested in. So if you've got someone who is interested in studying criminology, then that's a great way of accessing the people who are at the forefront.
Well, completely. I mean, it really is. I mean, the speakers that we have at CrimeCon, and this is different to anything else I've organised previously, all of the guest speakers are interested in the content, so they don't go anywhere. So, for example, Jackie Moulton, who Linda LaPlante's the real prime suspect, Jane Tennyson, that was based on Jackie Moulton. Jackie was one of my guest speakers at London. She didn't leave. She did one session, and apart from that, she's in every photograph in the audience, enjoying the event just like a visitor would. The same goes for Colin Sutton, who's been with me every single event so far. For those people that were in Glasgow last year, we had one session where Scottish detective David Swindle was on the stage talking about a particular case, and someone in the audience asked a question, because it's very interactive, CrimeCon. It's very audience participation. They asked the question, and it was something to do with the prosecution service. And David Swindle said, actually, I'm not going to answer that. And he pinged the question straight back out to someone in the audience. And it was Nazir Afzal, who was the chief prosecutor for over 30 years. So it's extremely insightful, because as a visitor, you're studying criminology. You've got Jackie one side, Nazir the other. I mean, how invaluable are those types of conversations? So it's very different. I mean, I don't have a green room. So in Glasgow, everyone is on the same track, so everyone gets there at 8:30 and has coffee, and while you're having that coffee break, you're with the podcasters and the partners and the guest speakers and my cast and crew, and everyone's together. And then we go through the whole sessions. If they're not speaking, they're watching. Then we have lunch, and the whole thing continues right through to Saturday night, when we're having a true crime quiz and a beer, and it's a bit more relaxed. So
I guess this would be the perfect time to let people know how they can learn more, where it's going to be, all those kind of details.
Cool. So it's really simple. You can go to crimecon.co.uk. We have 2 events listed. One is in London for next year, but the key one is Glasgow for next week. There are very few tickets remaining, but there are some. We do full day programme tickets where you come and do all of the sessions right up until the end when we finish at 10 o'clock. Or if your diary doesn't allow, you can come and join us for the last session and then stay for the evening entertainment, which is a lighter programme. Because in the day, we've got DNA analysis, cults, a lady called Mary Thompson who was married to a bigamist. We've got all sorts of different. Oh, and we're also covering the Nicholas Rossi case.
Right. Wow. And what you were saying, a couple of things, because you mentioned to me when we spoke previously that there isn't really a crossover. I expected there to be a crossover between crime fiction and true crime, and you say that really isn't the case. And is it for reasons that you found that, now your focus is on true crime documentary, true crime writing, and, just all things true crime, and fiction isn't that?
Now, I'll give you a really interesting example, and the thing that really blew my mind, if you like. I have had the incredible Linda LaPlante join CrimeCon for the last few shows. She was with me in September 21. She was with me in June 23. Everyone knows Linda. She's one of the most incredible thriller writers there is, and I love her books. Did you see I said loved her books then? I've sort of moved away from them now because of this true crime thing. She does a true crime podcast called Listening to the Dead with a former officer called Cass Sutherland. And interestingly for me, my audience came and were obsessed with that part of her work, and her book sales, not so much. You know, they just were not interested because it wasn't true crime. They would much rather pick up a book that is factual from an unknown author than they would from someone like Linda. And she will, you know, that's why she comes and she does her true crime podcast with us, because she's coming for a different angle. She did an incredible session with us on gate analysis. That podcast actually got recorded live and is on our podcast channel, Crime Conversations. So if anyone wants to have a listen to that, you'll be listening to Linda in that very true crime space, looking at that very interesting gate analysis discussion. So yes, that's why. I mean, you just don't, you'll find it, there's just not the crossover. It's, I mean, don't get me wrong, you don't start, what, you know, if you're into true crime, you don't then all of a sudden love rom-coms or love, you know, I think people just, they still like thrillers. And I think it's just the criticism, because the more you learn, the more you realise that silent witness isn't true. You know, no one can get the DNA analysis that quickly. It doesn't work like that. No one tramples over a crime scene like that. And certainly no one gets the access that Nikki does in all of those programs, but it makes a good program. The problem is, if you're my husband, you've got me going, that wouldn't happen. That wouldn't happen.
My dad was a doctor, and we couldn't watch anything medical for exactly that reason. They would say that would never happen. Oh no, they would never be put in that way. So I do absolutely understand that. But why do you think that true crime has had this huge growth and interest in the last, 10 years, maybe even less than that?
A few things. It's cheap to produce. I'm going to be quite basic, you know, I'm going to turn it on its head. That's great. But from a producer's point of view, it is very, very cost effective to produce, because a lot of it's reenactment, a lot of it's dramatized anyway, a lot of it's just site visit, limited crew, limited cast, normally one voice, so it's cheap to produce. That's the cynic in me. The next thing is the way in which it's being created is so respectful now to victims that you're not sitting there feeling like you shouldn't tell anyone you like true crime. You know, it's not frowned upon, which means it's more accessible, which means more people want to watch it, and more people are recommending different true crime podcasts or programs. People are quite freely, oh, what did you watch last night? Oh, I watched this, I watched that. I mean, I'll give you an example. Have you seen Painkiller?
No, I haven't. I
binged it at the weekend and did it, well, no, before the weekend, and I binged it in 3 nights. It's I definitely would say it's true crime. It's drama. It's on Netflix, and it's all about the legal opioid problem that was in America, and the FCA covering it up, and basically everyone getting hooked onto what was a legalized drug, but everyone was, you know, the doctors were getting bribed, etc., to prescribe it, and it became a real problem in America. And the way they've done it is it's a dramatization. So it's actors playing, but at the beginning of every episode, it's a real life family that say, what you're about to watch is a dramatization, but the concept matter of this dramatization is completely real. This is my son, or this is my daughter. So you go into watching it completely aware that this is a real life story and real life pain. So sorry, I'm rambling, but that was something I've recently watched, and that's happening in my office every day. You know, people come and say, what did you watch? It's not, I watched EastEnders last night. People are more interested in things that could happen, are happening, and I just think that's what's happening. It's just more accessible now. So yeah, in answer to your question, it is growing. I mean, every show I do, I say middle-aged women, but every show I do, I'm getting a younger student audience. And I don't know if you know this, but the amount of students that have signed up for university this year is at an all-time high for forensics.
Oh, really? No.
Absolutely all-time high. Absolutely all-time high, like massive, and it's up there in the top at a lot of universities. My worry with that is, are there enough jobs to go around for all of these students that are training in that field? I don't think so. So that's the, but science and DNA, you know, everything's changing all of the time. So it wasn't that long ago that we didn't have, you know, DNA, and we didn't have fingerprints and stuff. So it's quite an interesting time. But like I said, it's rising. I don't see it stopping anytime soon. I really don't.
I'm talking about rising. It definitely seems that true crime podcasts, in terms of new podcasts, that's really kind of taken off, isn't it?
Yeah, well, a lot of people thought they could do it in lockdown. They were all locked up.
Yeah, I guess,
do it. Most of them can't. So they came and went. But yes, I mean, the thing with podcasts is, especially with the ones that follow active cases, it can be done in a very, very respectful way. I mean, a lot of the podcasters that I work with, well, all of the podcasts I work with are vetted. So we have to make sure that they are victims first and that they are doing things in the right way, as ethically as they can. Because we don't want to just start talking about someone's family without that family at least knowing that that's being discussed. But yeah, they're on the rise, and there's some really, really good content out there, and some fantastic content. I mean, one of the podcasters coming to Glasgow is a podcast called It's Foul Play, and the host, Wendy, is a British lady, and her co-host is an American guy, and they won the Indie Podcast of the Year at the True Crime Awards that I launched early on this year. So that's another reason you can see true crime's growing, to the point that there are industry awards in everything, you know, TV and broadcast, etc. For the last 5 years, in the TV and publishing and podcast awards, you've seen one of the categories being true crime. But as the years have gone, that true crime categories are getting bigger and bigger. So it felt only appropriate to bring, for the first time, podcasts, books, and on screen all together to celebrate the good work that's being done in this space. So we launched that last June, and they'll return again next April. So that's interesting, but that's industry, and that will really recognise the podcast. And that was a combination of independent podcasters. And if you look at someone like BBC Sounds, they're commissioning so much good investigative, and moving their journalists into that podcast space, because they can do a deep dive. They can really do a deep dive into these cases, which you can't do on TV or in print. That's why podcasts are so amazing.
That's what I was going to say. I say the way that now the BBC have decided to go for it kind of says in itself, well, this is here to stay. I just finished listening to the Missing Madonna podcast about the stolen art, and you know, these are, as you say, they can be as long as they want to be, really, and really go deep into them rather than give it 60 minutes and then move on to the next thing.
Yep. I've got so many on my phone, and I flip-flop between, if I've just got a quick half-hour journey, I'll listen to something that covers a quick case in 30 minutes, and I've got others that I'll listen to on a long 4-hour car journey, or when I'm traveling, I'll listen and and binge on it, and literally have my earphones on, and I'm gone for 6 hours, and I'm listening to the whole thing. And I think there are some really, really good content makers out there. And that's another industry that I don't see going. I mean, podcasting is a bit like the Wild West at the moment. It's a bit crazy and a bit chaotic. You'll know that. I mean, it is a bit of an odd environment, because there's no sort of control. The TV is very easy to understand, and so is publishing. But podcasting is like the Wild West. But I think there's better content, especially in the true crime space, in podcasting coming through.
Yeah, it's because when I started, which was over 10 years ago now, you used to get the question, what's a podcast? At least I don't ask that anymore. So that's the... And again, you mentioned the kind of the duty of care, and I was wondering about the feedback you get from people who attend CrimeCon, who are involved personally in crime. What feedback do they give you?
Well, any family that has got involved with CrimeCon, I've personally invited and obviously keep in touch with. I think that's the key thing. One of the things I realised, I mean, good TV production companies don't do this as a rule, but it wasn't too long ago that they would put someone on the screen tell me your story about your loved one, and then they would see you later, have their 5 minutes of fame, and then there's no aftercare for them.
Yeah.
So we keep in touch and hopefully help support those campaigns. So, for example, last year, Kirsty Maxwell was a victim abroad, and her mum and dad came and shared the story at CrimeCon Glasgow. They won't be taking a main session this year because we covered it last year, but they are coming to be in the audience, and I've given them a space so they can communicate and talk to the visitors that are new, so they can help with their charity, etc., etc. So we do a lot of support with just keeping the conversation going, and there are a lot of incredible people. I mean, I've done a lot of work with Mary McCourt. She was the mother of Helen McCourt, who was murdered 30 odd years ago. And she was murdered by a pub landlord called Ian Sims. And it was the first case that was completely done on DNA. Her DNA was found in the boot of his car. He was convicted of murder, but no body has ever been found. He has refused. So he's dead now. He died last year. And basically, he never ever disclosed where the body was. And Mary has campaigned, so Helen's mum has campaigned tirelessly year after year to get that law changed. And that law did change in 2019. So if that happened to you today, that person inside would not be permitted parole until they disclosed. Why should they? Why should they be up for parole to come out when the mum has not buried her daughter? You know, the whole thing's wrong. It's all about the criminal, not about the victim and the victim's family. So she lobbied and she campaigned, and that law was changed. So at the True Crime Awards this year, we didn't want to just make it about the production companies and the TV companies and the publishers, you know, who are producing the content for commercial gain. We wanted to remind everyone of the real impact that this has on people. So at the end of the True Crime Awards, after everyone got their awards, we got Mary up. She didn't know, and we got her up and we gave her a special recognition award. Everyone's big standing ovation for all of the hard work that she has done to help other families, and she will continue to do it. You know, this is a woman that for 30 years has looked for her daughter. This is a woman that is now in her 80s. She won't give up. She will not give up. So it's those sorts of people that I've had the pleasure of meeting that make you realise you really shouldn't worry in the morning if you've, you know, got out of bed the wrong side, because what's going on with you really is irrelevant compared to what some people are dealing with each day. So yeah, back to the how has it changed me? I think it's made me a lot kinder.
Yeah. And what CrimeCon therefore does is give a platform for these people that I think previously weren't heard, or were heard for too short a space of time, or were heard, as you say, for 5 minutes and then moved on to the next thing, and that's it. So you've got, yeah. I
mean, a lot of people that come to CrimeCon are or have been affected by true crime in some way. So you know, I get a number of people that might be in domestic abuse relationships, or I get a number of people that may have sadly been raped but have not shared that story, or a number of people that have been affected by their local community because they live in London and someone's died recently through knife crime. You know, there are lots of fraud. I mean, cyber crime, and I mean, we're doing a whole session on cyber stalking. The amount of people, especially the new generation, the new kids, are getting affected by this new way of hurting someone is horrendous. So there's a lot of people that come that actually sit in the room and they afterwards will email me or come and talk to me and say, I always thought I was the only one, Nancy. This is nice. You know, it's nice to be in an environment where actually I feel like it's okay to talk about it, but also that I can go and get the help, whether it's Refuge or Cybercrime Helpline or the anti-stalking agencies that we work with, and can get help. But I'm painting a picture that everyone's sitting there, you know, with a lot of baggage, crying their eyes out. It isn't. I've never met such a nice bunch of people. It's such a fun environment, because I think with the light and the, you know, with the dark, you have to have the light. So it's just the nicest bunch of people you're ever going to meet. And interestingly, most of the people come to CrimeCon by themselves. So if they're in a circle of friends, this is true of me, I really liked my Marvel, forget crime for a minute, I really like my comics, but my close group of friends don't. You know, they just don't, it's not for them. And I was that one, and I would go to events. So for the true crime community, they're going, and then when they go there, they're meeting people that are like-minded, that they're then becoming, you know, friends for life. I mean, you met one of my visitors recently, and she's been to every single CrimeCon since I launched. She didn't know a soul.
Yep.
And she's now coming next week to meet all of the people that she met at all of the previous shows. So it's really building a community of people that share the same interests and values.
And if I remember rightly, she went to London on her own, as you say.
Yep.
Maybe that first time to London, I think. I hope I'm
Yep.
not being mistaken there. And so that's really interesting. It's really interesting in itself. And you're having it in Glasgow on the 16th, and then next year in London. Are there any thoughts of expanding to other places?
Yes, there are. I get asked that question all of the time. So at the moment, if you were to take a scattergun and look at the country of where people are travelling from, we literally could go, it's everywhere, you know. So I'm getting requests for Leeds and Manchester and Birmingham and Devon and Germany and France. You know, we're getting requests everywhere. We will always do London. We will always do London as a 2-day event, because that's sort of the hub for a lot of the speakers and and it's easy accessibility, etc. So we will always do London, and then do a regional show, if you like, in addition. So we will do Glasgow and then decide what we do for next year. But yeah, there will be plans to move and grow this brand, absolutely.
Well, Nancy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I have to say, when we met previously, if I knew you were such a Marvel fan, we could have had a great conversation about that, because so am I. But maybe that's for another time.
Oh, Stan Lee was just an inspiration. I literally love Stan Lee, and I love playing with my little girl. And it's such a shame that he's passed now, but I love the fact that you can watch the Marvels and go, Stan Lee, because he always makes a cameo. I love it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But thanks so much for taking the time to tell us about CrimeCon. It's been fascinating, and all the best with it.
Thank you very much. And if anyone watching or listening wants to come next week, we have limited tickets. And if you quote SWH, you can get 10% off. Thanks to Alistair.
Yeah,
okay.
That link will be on the website for you to take advantage of that. And thanks very much for that, Nancy.
No problem.
And we'll be back soon with someone completely different.